We're all social creatures at heart. It's just baked into our DNA. But what happens when the very thing that's supposed to bring us joy, connecting with other people, just leaves us feeling nothing? Well, today we're going to dive into that paradox and the science behind a trait called social anhedonia. So let's start with a basic truth, something that really shapes almost everything we do. We are hardwired for connection. This deep need to belong, it's what drives us to make friends, to build communities, to seek each other out. It's fundamental.
But what if that wiring feels a little different? What happens when interacting with people doesn't really bring that hit of joy or satisfaction? This is the central puzzle we're going to unpack today.
Now, there's a clinical term for this experience, social anhedonia. And before you jump to conclusions, I have to be clear, it is probably not what you're picturing in your head right now. Okay, so clinically, here's the definition. It's a trait like disinterest in and a lack of reward from social engagement. Now, the two things you really need to hang on to there are trait-like, which means it's a pretty stable part of who someone is, and the really big one, lack of reward. And this is so important because this is where we clear up some huge misconceptions. Social anhedonia is not social anxiety. That's all about a fear of being judged. And it's also not the same as introversion. That's just a preference for being alone to recharge. The key, the defining feature here, is a reduced ability to actually feel pleasure from being around people. So let's just hammer this point home. The problem comes from a lack of positive feelings, not from having more negative ones. It isn't about being scared to go to the party, it's about getting to the party, looking around and just feeling nothing at all.
So, what is going on in the brain when we do feel that social pleasure? Well, modern research points to this really fascinating three-part system that basically governs how we experience rewards.
So this pleasure cycle, it starts with what's called wanting. That's the anticipation, right? That feeling of looking forward to seeing your friends. Then comes liking. That's the actual in-the-moment enjoyment you get from the conversation. And finally, you've got learning, which is where your brain connects that good experience with those people, and that's what makes you want to do it all over again.
Now, with social anhedonia, this whole cycle just breaks down. And the breakdown can happen at any point in the chain. Maybe that anticipation, that wanting, just never really builds up. Or maybe the liking, the actual pleasure, is missing in the moment. Or it could be that the brain just fails to learn and record the interaction as a positive, rewarding thing.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Social anhedonia isn't just a symptom of one specific disorder. Researchers actually see it as a transdiagnostic trait. That's just a fancy way of saying it's a common thread that runs through a whole bunch of different mental health conditions. For instance, if you look at schizophrenia and psychosis, social anhedonia is one of the most stable, most enduring features, and it's a huge factor, directly linked to why people might withdraw and have fewer close relationships over their lifetime. Then you've got depressive disorders. In this case, it's not only tied to how severe the symptoms are, but its presence can actually be a sign that standard treatments might not work as well, which makes it a really critical thing for doctors to watch out for. And the connection doesn't stop there. Studies show that people with anorexia and bulimia often have higher levels of social anhedonia, and it's frequently connected to how long-term or persistent the illness becomes. What about PTSD? Well, here, social anhedonia is thought to show a really deep imbalance. The brain's threat avoidance system is on high alert, while the reward-seeking system gets turned way down. This messes up the ability to see positive social stuff as something to approach, not run away from. And finally, in autism spectrum conditions, getting less reward from social interaction is seen as a core feature. It's considered part of what's called the broader autism phenotype, that whole range of traits associated with autism. And it's a separate thing from other challenges, like difficulty reading social cues. Okay, so after all of that, it brings us right back to that central puzzle we started with. If social anhedonia turns down the desire for social contact, what does that mean for one of our most basic human emotions? Loneliness.
This is what researchers call the loneliness paradox. The research is super clear. Even though people with high social anhedonia don't get pleasure from being with others, they still report feeling intensely lonely. So, how is that possible?
And the answer, honestly, is pretty profound. That motivation to connect might be turned way, way down, but it's not gone completely. That fundamental human need to belong is still there. And when that need isn't met, the pain of its absence, that feeling of loneliness, is still felt, and felt deep. So what's actually going on in the brain to cause this? Well, scientists think this paradox is tied to glitches in two key brain systems. You've got the dopamine system, that's our engine for wanting things. It drives us to seek out social rewards. And then there's the opioid system, which lets us like or enjoy that warm, fuzzy feeling of bonding. A disruption in either one of those can break the whole cycle.
And that right there is why this all matters so much. Getting a handle on this straight is absolutely critical. It could be the key to unlocking new ways to treat loneliness and improve social well-being for people across a huge range of mental health challenges.
Which leaves us with one last, really powerful question to chew on. When your brain's own automatic reward system for being social is kind of offline, how do you even begin to relearn its value? It's a massive challenge that really gets to the heart of what it means to heal and to reconnect with each other.